Alright, we are recording for chapter 12 of the Search for Spock, so the penultimate chapter. Various things happen here. I'm hoping I can keep the video short. I kind of doubt it, not just because of the ranting, but because there's a fair amount that happens here. So, at the start, well, the end of chapter 11 had Kirk go over to David's body, and after he gets up, he goes back and asks Sav what happened. He gave his life to save us, she said. She stopped, then shook her head and turned away. She said very softly, "That is all I know." So I think some of that is similar to what's in the movie, that he gave his life to save us. I believe that is the line in the movie, but obviously delivered differently in the book, because book Savick is more emotional and is allowed to be more emotional. So I'm happy to see that, but that is all I know. I'm a little puzzled by it. It might just be a comment that because, well, she might not want to share that she entered into her rage over it, which is fair, or that she's stating that when that happens, I don't have a memory of what actually happened, so that's all I got. So Kirk does communicate up to provoke Krug into... His hope was to beam them all up. That's not what happened. Krug beams down. And we do have... because Krug orders Maltz to beam the rest up, except for Kirk and Spock. "You should take the Vulcan too," he said easily. Kirk: "No." "But why?" "Because," Krug said, "you wish it." Keeping his gaze on Kirk, he picked up the phasers, the Federation phasers, and flung them one by one over the promontory and down the side of the mountain. And then the Maltz Troy True, or whatever that is exactly, that's in the movie, to get them to beam up. And again, we get a book Savick here. "No," Savick cried, but the beam attenuated her voice. She vanished with the others. That's too emotional for how Savick is portrayed in the movie. Now, one thing interesting is how... Okay, a couple things interesting here. They're right next to each other, like the two highlights are for these two separate things. One is, Krug still seems to just be that noble Klingon warrior. I'm serious. He even here doesn't seem to have fallen to being cruel. I mean, yeah, the whole "because you wish it" a little bit, but he is not just being cruel. It is as though this is his way to get his honor back. He still cares about that. So he is still, it's about his culture. And I like that. And we get something later with Maltz, that the situation for Krug and Maltz are different, yes, but it is, I think, very appropriate to interpret what Maltz is saying there concerning Klingon culture as also being true for Krug. So we get the whole, look around you, the planet is destroying itself. Krug smiled. "Yes," he said, "exhilarating, isn't it?" Which Christopher Lloyd does a very good job of portraying that, I feel. That it is, and this makes sense to me for Klingon. I mean, maybe he's a little mad, but that they wish to struggle, they wish to fight, not just against enemies, but also even against the world itself. It's like the idea that the planet is being destroyed around them. It's like, cool. That just makes us all so much more interesting. Let's just go at this all the more because of all that. I appreciate that. I like that. If we don't help each other, we'll all die here. "Perfect," Krug said triumphantly. "That's the way it shall be." He loomed over Kirk, smiling his wolfish smile. "Give me Genesis," he said, each word struck like a blow. And then we get to where we get the blows. So, one thing that had occurred to me before starting the chapter, we do have the problem that Savick, who being a Vulcan is stronger than a human, doesn't matter, male, female in that case, she is stronger than any human. But she was bested by the Klingons. Krug should be a lot stronger than Kirk then, and it's even mentioned at one point he's also younger. Krug would be younger than Kirk, So really, a fight between them, Krug should win easily. Except that there's Genesis. So it is... I think a good way to put it is Kirk really in this fight is just surviving. It's Genesis that actually kills Krug. That's not quite the case in the movie. I think it makes it suggest that they're closer, but here, not so much. So Genesis's destruction causes Krug to lose his balance and fall. As he's trying to get up, that's when Kirk tries to tackle him. Kirk's breath rushed out as if he had run into a solid wall. Okay. Krug hits him in the side. Krug ran towards his phaser because he had dropped it. Kirk sprinted out and tackled him again at the knees. They both went down. They try to get up. Kirk gets up first, and he is basically taking advantage of this and doing what sharp jabs he can. That it's little damage, but it keeps his opponents off balance and flailing. Kirk's knuckles were raw. Each blow shot pain up his hands. The livid glow of magma haloed the Klingon commander. He swung and missed. His momentum pitched him around. Kirk sprang at him and hit him one more time with his battered hands. Krug fell. This is him then tumbling over. So it is... Yeah, Kirk is really just surviving here. But it's still... Even though Krug is so much more powerful than he is, it's still... He's being hit. And things are unstable, so he is losing balance. It's like, this makes sense. And it's also... Well, okay. How even in the previous video, how I went on that rant that I really wish I could focus down on words better for how I want to describe action. Here, progression is not as obvious because it is between just these two completely one-sided. But it's a Genesis situation. So in that way, that's where we actually see the progress. It is how the planet is decaying, is falling apart. That's causing Krug to constantly lose his footing, allowing Kirk to have the advantage. Which, in a way, the fact that Kirk... It's not specifically say here, but basically, Kirk is recovering from losing his footing faster than Krug. Maybe it's because he's smaller, maybe it's because he's human and so a little bit just faster. Like, Klingon maybe is just adapted more for strength, for power, not for speed. So, or agility, so Kirk may have an advantage there. It's not stated, I'm just giving a possible explanation. And by continuing to just keep him off balance, Genesis is having a stronger impact on Krug. And so Krug falls back and is caught on this one thing. Hang on. Wrong way. He fell down, starts laughing at Kirk. So Kirk does the stupid thing of jumping down. And Krug hits him. Okay, Krug broke Kirk's hold. The size and relative youth of... Yeah. Size and relative youth of the young Klingon commander began to overwhelm him. Krug broke Kirk's hold and slammed him in the chest with both hands. The impact flung Kirk violently back against the cliff's rock wall. So he is very much struggling here. And Krug didn't approach at this point, possibly being overconfident. But, he's waiting for Kirk to regain some strength to be a fitting opponent. Which, again, a Klingon would care about that. Klingons want to... They want a fight to end with honor. So they want it to be, that the opponent is as strong as they can be, because that keeps it fair, that keeps it honorable. But as he's waiting over there, Genesis is continuing to fall apart. The column in which Krug stood fractured and began to sink. The magma swallowed its base. The whole column began to topple. Krug bounced upon it, the heat rising around him in waves. To Kirk, it looked as if the commander were enjoying his peril, testing his nerve. Completely a Klingon thing, that makes sense. "Jump, damn you," Kirk cried, and still Krug delayed. The column of stone continued to tilt, to sink. Krug leaped, but he had waited an instant beyond the last moment. He fell short. He slammed up against the fragmenting columns, gripping the edge, his feet dangling into the glowing pit. So this is kind of sort of like what's in the movie. It is a bit different here. But it's also, it then continues. Hang on, let me just. Kirk does try to help him up because he sees it as, if I can keep him alive, I might be able to get him to beam us all up. Like, he doesn't need Krug to die. He just needs Krug to beam them up. Because the other option is he has to somehow convince Maltz to beam them up. Him and Spock up. So Krug is holding onto this cliff. Kirk is right there. Krug abandoned his hold on the cliff and clenched both hands like claws around Kirk's ankle. Jim Kirk felt himself sliding along the rough surface of the cliff, off balance only a hand's breadth from the edge. He struggled back, digging his fingers between the hexagonal patterns where the basalt continued to fragment. His fingernails ripped, and he left streaks of blood on the dark stone as he slipped further and further over the edge. Technically it's farther and farther, I said it wrong, but the fierce heat of the magma gusted up around him. So I highlight that in part because his fingernails ripped. It's like, this is a much more serious situation than what you see in the movie. To be fair, you don't want to put an actor through that, and why spend the visual effects of trying to depict it? But it's like, Kirk is in a very bad situation here, which makes sense. I mean, the whole planet is dying, and he is an inferior fighter to Krug, so yeah. But he heard Krug laughing again, and this I don't care for. Laughing with contempt and victory. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Laughing at the death of Kirk's son. At Kirk's determination to save his friends. At Kirk's defeat and at Kirk himself. It's like, Kirk has known Krug for maybe half an hour, and he's reading all this into the laughter? I don't care much for that. That seems rather stupid. It might be Kirk's interpretation that, Krug is just laughing at these things, like Kirk is going a little bit mad because of his grief over it all. It's like, that I could understand, but that's not what's written here. And I don't think that how it is written even suggests that. So I don't care for this. I don't think that that's a good idea there. Damn you, Kirk cried in rage. I have had enough of you. He kicked out angrily and again desperately. Krug's grip loosened, faltered, and broke. And then Kirk scrambled back onto the cliff. So this is quite different than the movie, because in this, like, Kirk is also holding on. Whereas in the movie, he's like lying back and, is able to kick out like that. No, that's not quite it. Another small difference, which when reading, I figured, okay, this is curious. In the movie, Kirk uses a Klingon communicator. In this, no, he finds Krug's phaser and grabs that, but he uses his own communicator to contact the ship, and he did his best to copy Krug's low, harsh voice and repeated the last words Krug had transmitted. And at first nothing happens, he tries it again, and then he and Spock, because he is holding on to Spock, beam up. We now cut to the ship a few minutes earlier, with mainly following Saavik, because they have now, all the prisoners have materialized, and there's Maltz. Yeah, and hang on, I do want to check, because there are one or two things in my notes that isn't connected to a highlight. Yeah, I do have the one thing here that, but I already kind of said that Krug does not seem to have been broken, does not seem to have gone mad either. He continues to just be a noble Klingon warrior, seeking the preservation of his culture. And is like the epitome of that culture as well. And I like that. It's like he doesn't need to be just a bad guy. And it also does make me wonder, how would Krug this version of Krug compared to some of the other Klingons. And let's not go with the original series Klingons. Just because so many things changed between them, that version of Klingon and later versions. Let's just compare them against Duras, Gowron, if you want to include Kempek in there. Even Martok. Yeah, let's include Martok. Because Martok, I could believe, would be a better strategist. I mean, he's a general, not just a commander, not just a captain. But Krug, I can believe, is from a higher caste than Martok, because that's a whole thing in some of the episodes of Deep Space Nine. But now I'm just thinking, I could believe that Krug would not be too interested in suffering either Gowron or Duras. That they are both very political. I don't think Krug does not strike me as that. Like, Krug strikes me as a guy who he might not have been able to get along with Worf well, mainly because I don't think he could have peace with the Federation. He would tolerate the Federation. He wouldn't. I don't think he would allow peace with them. But I could see him and Worf getting along. Not necessarily as friends, but getting along. And I could see him and Martok being more at odds because of Martok being lower class. Yeah, I don't know, but it is definitely. I do think Krug is a much more interesting character than the movie suggests. So, so yeah, back on the ship. Saavik held back from touching McCoy again. When he brushed against her back on Genesis, it was not the Doctor she sensed, but Mr. Spock. McCoy carried in him the unique pattern of her teacher, trapped and blind and weakening. The experience left Saavik thoroughly shaken. This actually does help explain something. Because it did seem odd. She was holding on to Spock, they came up, and it was first McCoy who touched her, and she did seem startled by that and backed away, rather than lashing out to protect Spock. And it could have just been she could tell Bones touching her was not a threat. That's a thing. That's a real thing. That you can just tell by the manner of it, that you can sense. Nope. But it could be that's she drew back. It's like, why the hell did I just sense Spock here? That she had to draw back, and then it was like there's Kirk there, and she's still off balance. Like, what is going on? Very confused. So that actually does help explain things. But I do. Well, it gives a specific reason why. But I do think just interpreting it as she could tell the touch was of a friend, and that just confused her, backed off, because like very tense situation, now it's confused situation. Just so that still works as an explanation. But yeah, was there anything? I don't think there was anything more to say, and I want to be moving on. But yeah, it just I appreciate this being here, not strictly necessary, but I do think it does add to the story. Composed once more, Saavik mentally ran through the forms of address in the high tongue of the Klingon Empire. Because she's hoping, maybe I can convince Maltz, she doesn't know that's his name, but maybe I can convince him to help us. Which isn't, unreasonable. It also... That's true, yeah. So its forward port faced Genesis directly, the ship, and so they can see that happen, see what's going on. Its orbit around the sun was decaying rapidly. The star's blue-white disk grew larger as Saavik watched. Before the planet destroyed itself, its surface conditions would be lethal. So I do have an issue with that, though. Why is the planet's orbit decaying? There's no reason given for this. Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a mention that its rotation is speeding up, but that shouldn't impact its orbit. So yeah, it doesn't make sense. And it did also occur to me, if the planet is aging so rapidly, shouldn't the star also be? But we do get a mention later of it swelling, which, yes, that is what a main sequence star does towards the end of its life. When it's burning hydrogen, it produces this much energy, which is enough to counteract the gravity, but it's like it bounces out there. Once it starts burning helium, because it runs out of hydrogen, it starts producing that much energy. So it becomes a much larger star. It becomes a red giant. No, later on when it swells, it just swells, but then it just converts into protomatoplasma. But there is something else that happens there that I do like. So when we get to that, that is I. But yeah. So we're the opponent. We find ourselves in a delicately balanced position. She's trying to talk with Maltz here. He glanced at her sharply and frowned. His hand tightened on the grip of his phaser. Okay, so just that's stop. She stopped. The tone of his voice gave her little choice. Why do you speak to me in this manner? He said. He spoke at quite acceptable standard. I did not know you spoke our language, she said. Of course I speak your barbarian pidgin. Do you think me so ignorant of my enemies? But you speak to me in Kumburan, and I am Mumali. Could it be that you have not been taught the difference? It could be, Savick admitted. I did not intend offense. Could it be that you believe the slanderous cant to put about Kumburana are the in ascendancy over Umayyan? Yeah. Umayyan? I got a speech impediment on top of these being made up words, okay? Give me a break. I confess to an unforgivable ignorance of the subject, Savick said, not altogether truthfully. She had been told at the academy that the language she was studying was the only significant one in the Klingon Empire. That did not seem quite the appropriate response just now. In the Federation, we employ a single language in public so we may all communicate. Reductionists, he said with contempt. Obliterators of diversity. He muttered something unpleasant in a language Savick did not know. Then he started to say something in which she feared would be a lengthy tirade against the social or political group that opposed his own. It's like, okay, that last bit I don't even, but it's like, I like this because it is about, as I said before, Maltz cares about the Klingon culture. And I think it's reasonable to assume that this is also true for Krug. And that it's all about, all the stuff has just been about protecting Klingon culture while also following the tenets of Klingon culture, which is more warlike. So this destruction, it's justified to them, I guess is better. I was going to say it's not destruction to the few, but no, it actually still would be. But it is justified. And that even their language, like all these different dialects, it's like, you guys use only one. You're horrible. Why would you do that? You're destroying you're getting rid of all this culture. And it's like, I do think that, there's a fair argument to make with the whole, we're not destroying it. We have something common so everyone can speak. We're not saying you can't, see this guy over here, he speaks Russian. We don't even know what the hell he's talking about half the time. It's like, I still will speak Vulcan at times, but otherwise we use standard. It's like, how's that different from you guys? It's like, it could be, well, when we conquer someone, we make them, use our language. It's like, so you're getting rid of that diversity you say that you care about. They have diversity within the culture versus the Federation that has more of a superculture concept, which standard would be part of, and then all the subcultures remain. Which is a very... I'll admit, I'm biased, but because I also see it as that's how the American culture works. That there is an American culture, but it is a technically super culture kind of thing, and we've got all the smaller cultures within it that can be very reminiscent, very similar to the culture of a different nation. But ideally, there's assimilation in both directions, where things that are incompatible with the superculture are dropped. Things that are compatible remain, and also aspects of the superculture can adopt the subculture. So that can be somebody... Italy entered my mind first. So somebody comes from Italy to America. They may first live in Little Italy, where they can mainly keep to their own language. But it's like, hey, you know what? You obey the laws, no problem. And that's them assimilating to our culture, especially if they do need to give up certain things, where it's like, oh, well, you don't do that? Okay, I guess we can't do that anymore. But then it's also, if they start an Italian restaurant, for example, or something else that is part of Italian culture, and they're sharing that with us, then plenty of Americans would start adopting that. And in some cases, you then may see, and this would have already happened generations ago, where perhaps something from that Italian restaurant, if we continue it with food, is like very, very successful. And so it gets integrated into the American culture itself. Pizza is not a good example, unfortunately, because modern pizza is more so an American invention than traditional pizza from Italy. At least that is my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong there. Forgive me if I am. But it would be... I'm just trying to think. Would a hot dog kind of sort of be, because a lot of sausage stuff we got from Germany? Oh, well, not just Germany, but... like, hot dogs are considered a very American food, but the sausage, I could be that the original sausage behind the hot dog has a German ancestry, has a German origin, but it's become part of the American superculture, if you will. That, yeah. It's like, 4th of July, among things that you would eat is hot dogs. Also, I think bratwurst has actually become more and more popular for that. And that, I'm pretty sure bratwurst is straight up German. I don't know. That might just be because I'm originally from Wisconsin. And we definitely enjoy bratwurst in Wisconsin. And it could just be it has successfully diffused out from there, or just where I'm always familiar with. And yeah, so. But in any case, it is interesting to consider the two differences, those differences between the Federation and Klingons when it concerns culture. That the Klingons can see theirs as a superior culture because they have spread it potentially in a very hegemonic way, where they're just forcing their culture on others, whereas the Federation is not. It maintains... I don't even know what the word would be. Heteronomic? Not sure, but it has maintained those differences, but it still is like, hey, on Vulcan, guess what? You have to obey Federation law. But Vulcan culture itself continues to exist. However, it feels best, as long as it does not conflict with the Federation law. So, whose is better? Whose is worse? Klingons can argue that, well, ours must be better because look at how many planets are using it. It's like, well, yeah, but you force them to. Here, we don't force them to adopt a singular culture. They can keep their own. So it seems more chaotic, but it's also more diverse and more supporting of those cultures. And Walt seems to care about that diversity that is within his culture. So it is an interesting argument, but it is an interesting debate there, and it's, yeah. One thing, though, I do find a little funny, because I actually looked it up a few months ago. What is the difference between an empire and a kingdom? An empire doesn't necessarily directly rule every part of it, every province. A kingdom does. So that would mean then that with a kingdom, everything is under the direct rule of the king, right? And so it would be a single homogeneous culture, ideally. With an empire, though, you can't have you have governors that are lower, and so each place that is being governed can have its own culture, technically, but they all still answer to the empire. So in that way, the empire is more federation. But the Klingon Empire is seemingly more like a, because it is more homogeneous, it is a hegemony, would in fact not be, it might be, in the political sense, the structure of an empire, but its actual operation might be more like a kingdom. Just funny things to think about. Anyway, moving on. So as Saavik was trying to talk to him, the officer's like, I got my orders. I haven't got new ones, so doesn't matter what you say. I am obeying my orders. But then the communicator erupts with some static. No doubt this was his commander with new orders, orders that could not be of any benefit to Saavik and her companions. When she heard the voice, she started. She glanced at Captain Sulu, and by the way, this is like the first time I recall him actually being addressed as Captain Sulu. I don't even think Moreau addressed him as that earlier. I think he was just Sulu. I should maybe go back and check that. But she glanced at Captain Sulu and knew her suspicion was correct, because he was forcing himself not to react, not to burst out in surprise and relieved laughter. They both looked surreptitiously up at the command seat. The officer hesitated before replying to the order. Saavik dug her nails into her palms. Very uncomfortable here. But the officer touched the controls. And one thing interesting, so there was no mention at all of Saavik and the others moving. But Kirk, transport chamber solidified around them, and he then had to figure out, okay, what does he know about the layout of a Klingon fighter? Okay, I guess they somehow know that. And headed for the control room, he saw no one as he strode through the corridors, and he could not help but think with some trepidation that this was precisely the sort of emptiness the boarding party had confronted on the Enterprise. It was like, he's having to go through the ship. The others didn't. So Maltz decided to beam him in somewhere else? I don't know. That seems an odd choice. Regardless, but it kind of is explained. Doors opened for him. He stepped into the control room. Krug's second-in-command revealed no surprise when Kirk entered. Like Kirk, he held a phaser. Unlike Kirk, he was alone. Even if he fired now, he would fall to Kirk's phaser, and the prisoners behind him would become his captors. "Where is Commander Krug?" he asked. He spoke as if the question were his final duty. Kirk knew then that his masquerade had not fooled the officer for a moment. "Gone," Kirk said. "Dead, engulfed by Genesis." Defeated and resigned, the officer spread his hands. Kirk nodded once sharply. I like that for Maltz. That his loyalty to Krug was great. I don't want to say he had a love for him. I don't think that's quite... It's not inaccurate, but I don't think that's the best way to put it. I'm going to try to stick with loyalty for now. But it was I know that's Kirk's voice. Well, or at least he knows that's not Krug's voice, so it must be Kirk's. I need to know what happened to Krug. So, yep, beam him up. And he may also have understood what Saavik was saying as well. That's like, we all gonna die if we don't do something. He's like, might as well. And so it's like, and because this way, at minimum, he learns what happens to Krug, which matters to him. Which does matter. So he beams him up. And maybe that's also why he beamed him up in another location, so that there is time to be ready for when Kirk actually does come in here, like making sure he's aiming in that direction. I don't know. But once knowing that Krug has been defeated, it's like, well, the loyalty was mad to him. He's not somebody who wants to command, who is suited for command. That was mentioned earlier. So him resigning here is not inappropriate. It's not exactly Klingon, but it's not inappropriate. "You," Kirk said to him, "helpless or die. I do not deserve to live. Fine, I'll kill you later. Let's get out of here." A fair amount of this is then very similar to what's in the movie. Yeah, the Genesis world was gone. "Goodbye, David," Jim Kirk whispered. The disk of the star expanded, exploding to millions of times its previous volume until it was nothing but a tenuous, vaguely luminescent spiral cloud of plasma. That's not actually quite what happened. I mean, it would swell up to being a red giant. I don't actually remember what happens in that class of supernova. It might... Because when a red giant dies, it shouldn't just be sloughing off its surface as the final nova. It could be that as it continues fusion and eventually is putting on more and more power, that is kicking pieces off, but I would expect it to be over a long period of time. Or it could be it is swelled once it runs out of enough fuel. I just honestly don't remember how main sequence stars die, because there's some weird stuff that happens. Swell, I could see it eventually, fusion dies out, it starts collapsing down again, that reignites fusion, but it's a fusion that produces so much energy it then explodes out. But the reason why I don't quite know what happens there, because the core survives. That's what the white dwarf class of stars is. It's the core, the core that's basically solid carbon at this point from a main sequence star. I don't remember what the process is that sees everything above the core fade away, because gravity would hold it there, so it must have some sort of explosion that pushes it all out. But it just seems odd that how would it leave the whole core as carbon if it's just the carbon burning? So is it something else? I don't remember. I don't remember. It's one of those things. I don't know if it's a I don't remember. If it's a I was never taught. It could even be that we don't fully know. To be honest, I mean, they would not be the most energetic of explosions, most energetic of phenomena out there, so it might be harder to see this happen. Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff we only know what happens by seeing it happen, but supernovas are not the most common, and this would be a kind of supernova. Anyway, so continuing with this. It will form another world, Savick said. Kirk glanced at her sharply. The protomatter will condense to a plasma of normal matter. I am happy with this, because what they describe protomatter, that's exactly what would happen. She said. The plasma will cool, it will condense to dust, thence to a star, and a family of planets. This time, lacking the Genesis wave, it will be stable. Actually, just occurred to me that is false. Anyway, that it would condense to dust and then planets. A surface will harden, oceans will form, the sun's radiation will induce chemical reactions, life will begin. In time, it may evolve as David and his friends intended. In millions of years, Kirk said. No, Admiral, she said, in billions of years. I'm glad you find some comfort in the long view, Lieutenant. If this is supposed to be proto-matter, as in the stuff prior to normal matter forming from the Big Bang, you wouldn't have planets forming. Well, maybe gas giants, because that would be hydrogen, helium, and a little bit of lithium. So that also means you wouldn't get dust. It would literally just be the gas for first generation of stars. Moving on. Let me just check this. I don't know why the orbit was decaying and all that. Looks like we'll be able to keep this short because we're nearly at the end, but I do like this final highlight here. It is, well, more multiple highlights. Savick puzzled out the communication system. Lieutenant Savick, a Federation science ship Grissom, calling Starfleet Communications. Come in, please. Communications to Grissom. We've been trying to reach you for days. A freighter just picked up a lifeboat with a couple of survivors from a merchant vessel. They claim that Klingons raided their ship. It is likely their claim is true, Savick said. We experienced a similar encounter. I don't know why they'd be sharing the information. I'm glad that means Ferrandal was rescued. And maybe we're going to get more with that. I'm not sure, but it's like, cool. I'm happy about that. Why would they be sharing this? Unless they were saying... I don't remember Ferrandal knew anything that would connect it to Genesis. Well, maybe it's just this is near enough to Genesis that they're just mentioning it's like, yeah, we just found this, and now because it was in your general vicinity, and it's like, well, that's what happened to Grissom. Are you all right? I regret that we are not. We have a serious and continuing emergency. We have incurred many fatalities. We need your cooperation. You have it, Lieutenant. What do you require? A patch into your library's database and a general message to all ships between Mutara Sector and Vulcan. The patch is made. Starfleet Communication Officer paused a moment, then said in a startled voice, Lieutenant, what communications protocol are you using? What the devil are you flying? Please stand by, because Savick is getting the information that she needs. Okay, I'm just trying to check. I think it says at one point that she downloaded 2 things. Part of it is knowledge on the ritual that they're going to try to attempt with Spock. We'll see. Well, I will get to that. I will talk about that a little bit. It does seem odd, though. Wait, there's so much about Vulcans that they don't know, but this stuff they do. Convenient? Anyway, a new voice broke into the channel. Cut that damn data link. Lieutenant Savick, this is Starfleet Commander Moreau. What the hell is going on out there? Let me speak with Esteban. I am sorry, sir, she said. That is impossible. He cursed softly. I want some explanations. Have you seen the Enterprise? The Enterprise is not within our range, sir, she said. She did not know how to react to her newfound ability to dissemble nearly as well as a human being. What is the message you want us to relay? Moreau said. Klingon fighter on course to Vulcan. Savick heard exclamations of astonishment. She continued, This ship is not an adversary. It is held by a contingent of Federation personnel. It is running with shields down and weapons disabled. Essential that we reach Vulcan. Delay will result in further casualties. This ship is not an adversary. A Klingon fighter? Lieutenant, I ask again, where is Grissom? What in blazes is going on out there? Savick out. She shut down the channel. Good work, Lieutenant, Kirk said. Where is it? Savick could think of no suitable way to respond to a compliment for dishonesty. Well, it's fair. That's a fair reaction. And does continue. Federation ships, well, after a little bit, it's a lower highlight. Federation ships dogged their path, but none offered a direct challenge. Savick left her ship's systems open to surveillance, but continued to let Starfleet believe that she was the only Federation member on board. She said a contingent of Federation personnel, so there's multiple people there. I think it would be better if it were Starfleet member on board, like, you know, because if it's a lieutenant there is seemingly in command, that means a lot of people are dead. And that everyone else would just be, like... I'm trying to remember. Is it ensign? Wait. Crap, I cannot remember the enlisted ranks for the Navy. But then, to be fair, they never really go through it in Star Trek. I mean, there's ensign, that's about it, and cadet. That's lower than lieutenant. But ensign is technically the lowest officer, as I would call. I don't remember. Seaman is one of them. I don't remember where that is, but I don't think that's what they would use in... Well, oh wait, maybe it is in Star Trek. But anyway. So yeah, they are being followed, but no one's bothering with it. Because they are trusting it. So then it does talk about... she does read through... Anyway. Yeah, she transferred the Starfleet data to Captain Sulu's station. I don't know what that might be. Maybe it's just what the translations are for the Klingon translations. I don't know. But she looks at the second piece of information, which is dense Vulcan prose. She's figuring out about this ritual. And then short conversation with Kirk here that doesn't actually make much sense because he seems to be asking more pointed questions than seems reasonable for his absent level of knowledge of what's going on. But, you know, about the whole, but we have Spock alive, why can't they return his Katra? So he's like, can't we put it back into Spock's body versus just into the Hall of Knowledge? It's like, well, the Hall of Ancient Knowledge. It's like, why does he necessarily think that that is possible? But anyway. The circumstances are most unusual. The procedure you suggest is called Fall Torpan, the refusion. The conditions required to perform it have not occurred for millennia. There's considerable disagreement about whether it succeeded then, whether it could succeed at all, and indeed whether it should succeed. The elders may not choose even to attempt it. Even if they don't, what will happen to Spock? He will remain always as he is. Excuse me. So, at that, Kirk gets up, goes over to McCoy, who's with Spock's body at least, and neither of them are doing very well. Both the body is weakening, and so is McCoy. He can't like speak to Spock, and his own will is weakening. But when Kirk comes over and he places a hand on both of their shoulders. It even describes it as, despite being human, it is like a Vulcan putting his own strength into them. Which does make sense, because and like Kirk is like a brother to Spock, so that would provoke a positive response for Spock. And McCoy is, I'm going to say, equally the friend. I mean, it's not quite the same, but they are a triumvirate. It is the three of them together, which is why it still annoys me that I think I heard it mentioned, heard labeled the reunification. That doesn't seem right though. Whatever the Star Trek thing was, a group put together where they actually got Shatner and they got Robin Curtis. I'd mentioned previously, where it's basically Kirk is brought back before his death so that he can go and be with Spock when he dies of natural causes. And it's like, I get how this is nice, but when I first watched it, I'm kind of frustrated no one else had this criticism for it. It's like, I get it, that's nice and all, but Bones should be there as well. They should have somehow put McCoy there as well, because it is the three of them. Yes, everyone focuses on Kirk and Spock. I get that. It makes sense. But it is a triumvirate. It is a trio. Why are you doing Bones dirty? And by the way, I will also add that is the only trio, the only true triumvirate in Star Trek that I can think of. When you get to TNG, it's all largely pairs. That it's Data and Geordi's relationship. Okay, it's Picard and Data's relationship. It's Worf and Riker's relationship. Worf and Picard's relationship. Worf and Diana's relationship. Riker's and Deanna's relationship. Crusher and Beverly and Picard's relationship. Wesley and Geordi's relationship. Wesley's and Riker's relationship. Wesley's and Data's relationship. But it's always just the pairs. It's always pairs. Deep Space Nine as well. A lot of that, again, is just pairs. They are aware of the other stuff, so. But I mean, it's like you got Bashir and Garrick. You also have Odo and Quark, which Kira is connected to that, but by and large, she doesn't mess with that. She lets that be that. Dax and Cisco. Colm me. Oh, jeez. Why am I calling the actor's name there? And I'm blanking on the name even, which does really frustrate me. Chief O'Brien, Miles O'Brien. There we go. O'Brien and Bashir. I mean, it's all pairs. Even in Voyager, I'm pretty sure, again, it's only pairs. You don't have a trio like you did in the original Star Trek, and I do find that interesting. I mean, it works. TNG, Deep Space Nine, even Voyager. I'll acknowledge a lot of it works. Not so much in Voyager, but still works. The one issue I would really say is in the movies that, to me, with the original cast movies, you get a sense of family there, especially with the trio, but even with the rest of the bridge crew, plus Scotty. Scotty's technically not bridge crew, but I'll count him as that anyway. Whereas in TNG, the TNG cast movies, all those movies are really just Picard Data movies. Everyone else is just a supporting character, which sucks. They deserve better, but that's not what they get. They are more so the family in the series, not in the movies. All right, I'm gonna try to stop now so I can. It's starting to get late. I'm probably gonna regret this, but I'm gonna try to do the final chapter right after this. So yeah, see you next time.